Hey YouTube, Big Mike's Reptile Advice here. Today I'm going to go over the basic setup and necessities to keep a ball python. Here you'll see I have one ball python and an enclosure here. I like to decorate my tanks. I like to have a nice natural look for the snake. By all means, you can do this with fake plants and sticks. As you can see, I have a range of different plants here, sticks, vines. I even have a background that makes it look like plants. That's not a necessity, but as I said, I like to give it a natural look. I like a nice clean tank. So number one tip for housing a ball python is the type of enclosure. Okay? There are multiple different types of enclosures. There's Exoterra, there's ZoomEd, and then there's just basic fish tanks. The main reason why on the forums, if you read online, people will say do not use a fish tank is because of the top of the tank. Okay? And the top of the tank has a screen top. There's a way around this, and this is how I house my ball pythons. I have a custom cut piece of glass. You can also get a custom cut piece of plexiglass. So this is glass here. That's not screen. And the reason why you need a top that covers the entire top of the tank, it seals in humidity. If you have a fish tank like this, or any type of mesh topped tank, and you have a snake in there, it's almost impossible to keep the humidity in there. Okay, so you definitely need a solid top. If you do get a fish tank with the screen top, you must get either a custom piece of glass or a custom piece of plexiglass. And there's also two other alternatives. One is taking cardboard, cutting it to size, wrapping it in a material or foil, and putting it over the tank. As you can see, there's no spaces, it's tightly cut, it's professionally done, but you can measure it yourself and do it with cardboard. Another way people do this, they also take towels. They take thick towels, cotton towels, and they lay it over the top of the snake tank. It may not look pretty, but it's better to have a healthy animal than the aesthetics on your enclosure. Tip number two, you want a top that's able to be locked or secured. I've read so many times on the forums that my ball python got out, I don't know how, I have a top on it. Ball pythons, believe it or not, are very strong when they take their heads and they push it on the side of the tank. And a lot of times they're able to move the lid and wiggle out. I got this specific tank because it came with a little piece here, and I have this little metal piece with a little nub that keeps the latch closed, and the snake cannot physically push through when this latch is in, like this. You can also use any type of small key lock. You can use, you can really, anything that'll fit in here. You can get clips for the top. They sell tanks with clip tops. It has to be secure and no gaps. As you can see here, there's no gaps for him to squeeze through. That's very, very important, okay? The worst thing in the world is coming home and finding out that your reptile escaped and you have no idea where he is, okay? Now, let's get to the basics, which is heat and humidity. Two of the top priorities when you have a reptile, snake especially, you need the humidity and the temperature to be correct. This helps the temperament of the snake, this helps against respiratory infection, and this helps with shedding, so the snake sheds in one piece, okay? So I'll go over heat first. A lot of people either disagree with dome lamps, heat lamps, or don't use heat lamps for snakes. One of the main reasons is that they say that with a heat source, it sucks out the humidity. To compensate for that, I have a water dish partially under the heat spot, under the hot spot. Okay, so basically during the day, when the lamp is on, the heat will turn the water and make condensation, evaporation, and it'll cause humidity. Okay, and as you can see, I measure my humidity and I measure my temperature with Ixacar gauges, which I've gone over in another one of my videos. This is a smaller circle type. It's got temperature and humidity reading on the same little fixture. It's completely digital. It's guaranteed to be 1% within humidity and temperature range. And they've been tested with humidity packs. And I'll post a link for all of that. And I have them set in 3 strategic places. One on the cool side. Let the camera zoom in here. One in the middle. And one on the hot end. Okay? That is the basic setup for a ball python enclosure. Snakes, ball pythons, they regulate their internal body temperature based on their surroundings. Okay, they're cold-blooded animals. So you need a cool end for the snake. The middle section is a mixture of the hot and the cool end. The temperature is a little higher than the cool end. And then you have the basking area, which is the hot spot. Those are 3 necessities that you need. You need a hot spot, the middle part, and the cool spot. Okay? So, temperature. This is usually 85 to 90 degrees, thanks to the heat lamp. You can also have the ambient temperature raised with heat panels. That's a different setup that I don't use. You can Google heat panels for snakes and you can see how people utilize that, but I use the dome fixture. Okay. In the cool end, it gets down to 75, 80 degrees. Okay. Now, you want to make sure that the hot spot is not too hot for your snake. In my boa enclosure video, I went over having a temperature gun and strategically setting up a hot spot. So what you want to do before you put your reptile in your enclosure, so before you go out and buy that snake, you want your enclosure perfectly set up. You don't want to buy a snake and all the other materials at the same time and set up everything while your snake is in the cage. That stresses out the animal. So before you go out and buy your reptile, you want to make sure your enclosure is set up perfectly with temperature and humidity. Okay? So, setting up a hot spot with a temp gun. You want to do a little experimentation because there's different watt bulbs out there. There's 20 watt, 30 watt, 40 watt, all the way up to 100 watt bulb and beyond. This is kind of a small enclosure, so I had to experiment. First I had a 50 watt, it ended up getting too hot. Then I had a 40 watt. I believe I now have just a 30 watt bulb. And how you make sure that it's not too hot for your snake, you have your enclosure set up, you have your heat lamp on. I take out the reptile, I leave the bulb on, and I let it run for a few hours. And then I'll go in with the temp gun and I'll check the humidity everywhere that's underneath the heat lamp. I'll check the aspen bedding, I'll check on the top of the hide because it could be a ceramic or a wood or a clay and it can absorb heat. I check everywhere to make sure it's not too hot. When I was experimenting with the higher watt bulb, the 40 watt and the 50 watt, it got up to 110 to 115 degrees, and even on top of the hide, which I think it's a ceramic, it absorbed a little more heat and it was 120 degrees, which is way too hot for your reptile. So you want to make sure you have the hot spot set up correctly. Also in regards to heat, and also if you're having trouble keeping an 85 to 95 degree basking temp area on your hot end, you need what's called an under tank heater. Okay, so an under tank heater is a mat. It's electronic and it sits underneath your tank and it sticks to the bottom of the glass. One important factor of having this is not squeezing the mat in between whatever your base is and the bottom of the tank. There needs to be breathing room air so the heat can flow in and out and not cause combustion, and it is a fire hazard. So I went to the store and I got these little feet that they put under furniture, and it gives a nice little gap, and you can see there's a gap here. There's airflow for the heat to come in and out. It won't get too hot, and you want that gap throughout the bottom of your tank. So get these little spacers, little pieces of plastic that usually go under furniture table feet, and you want to put it under your tank. Okay. Also, a thermostat is a must. I have a thermostat set up here with a heat probe. The heat probe goes from the thermostat, it's connected to the heat mat, and the placement of the probe is very important. A lot of people put it inside the tank, which I don't recommend because the snake can move the heat probe. It can put urites and urine on it, which can short it out. I put the probe between the mat and the bottom of this glass. So the heat probe is under here with specialized electrician tape that could take up to 500 degrees. Okay? And there's the setup. In terms of humidity, you can use a Reptile like I have on one of my other enclosures, or you can use the air transfer system, which I went over in my boa enclosure video. Here's a better look of it. This is the air transfer tube. There's a bubbler, an aquarium bubbler set up back there, and bubbles are going into this tube that's set up with distilled water. Bubbles are popping on a sponge that's in this enclosure here, and when the bubbles pop, it creates humid air that goes through this tube here and all the way inside your tank. And that lets a flow of pure, clean, humid air in the tank. And right now, my temperature and humidity is very nice. I have 67% humidity and 78% heat on my cool end, 57% humidity, 80% heat in the middle, and then 43% humidity and 90% temperature on the hot end. Okay? You're never going to get your humidity and temperature exactly to stay throughout the day. It's common sense, it's real life. Temperature and humidity fluctuate. You don't want to be in the extremes. You don't want 10 to 20% humidity, and you don't want 110 to 120% heat. You want to stay as close as possible to the suggested heat on the hot side that you find online and the suggested cool temperature on the cool end that you find online. And when you look online, there's variance from about 5 to 7% on what people say is the perfect temperature and humidity for a ball python. But if you're in the range, then you're going to have a healthy snake. Okay? Another important factor of keeping your ball python is hides. Ball pythons love to be in hides, sometimes all day, if not for days on end. Don't be alarmed if your snake stays in the hides all day. Ball pythons are not very active snakes during the day. They like to hide. As you can see, and in this tank I just have a normal ball python. He's in his hide. Happy as can be. Okay? Now, when you get hides, the first most important factor is that it's tight to the animal's body. Ball pythons love to be in hides that almost touch them on all sides. So when you get a ball python as a baby, you're going to need small hides. As the ball python grows, you're going to need bigger hides. Okay? So be prepared to spend money on hides throughout the length or throughout the lifetime of the snake as it grows in width and girth and length. Another factor is that when you have a hide on the hot end and a hide on the cool end, which is the setup that you should have, one on the cool end, one on the hot end, the hides need to be identical. The reason that is you don't want the snake to favor one hide. Say I had a large hide on the hot end and a smaller hide on the cool end, and the snake feels more comfortable in the smaller hide on the cool end, he will never go to the hot end and sit in the hot end. And that can cause problems for the snake. He won't digest properly because he won't have the basking heat to help him digest his meal. So the hides have to be identical. Okay? That is very, very important. So we covered a lot in this video. We covered temperature, we covered humidity, which is helped with a dome fixture and an under tank heater. You absolutely need a thermostat for your under tank heater. We covered humidity that can be helped with a Reptile or an air transfer system, which I'll post a link for. We've covered hides, having identical hides. The type of bedding, I use Zoomed Aspen bedding. It's very absorbent, captures odor. You absolutely need a water dish. and it always needs to be filled. Okay, clean water for the snake. A snake doesn't drink often, but sometimes it likes to soak its body, sometimes it does like to take a drink. You absolutely need water in a water dish, and you need the water in the water dish if you're going to use a heat lamp, because you need that extra humidity from the evaporation of the water. We also cover the security of the tank and the top of the tank that needs to be sealed so it captures in the humidity. Okay? Any questions, please post, guys. I appreciate your time. Hopefully this helps out some new snake beginners, and more videos to come soon. Thank you. Like and subscribe.